Riding toward higher ground. What is inherited and what is learned. Despite few people in my current world having actually seen me on top of a horse, I've spent a large portion of my life identifying as a rider. There are many reasons for the sabbatical, but the truth is, I have learned more from horses by their side than I ever figured out astride. I will always be a riding instructor, but that title has come to embody a whole horse and whole human way of leading people as they explore the complicated, simple, mysterious, and grounded relationship with horses that is worlds away from the forceful mechanics that marked my early career. I've personally had legions of instructors, mentors, and trainers who filled me with knowledge and helped me become the riding stable manager that I am today. I will find many more teachers as I continue this journey because a life with horses isn't a flow chart. It's a shore of shifting tides. The choices I make with horses today are a monument to the wisdom and ignorance of the teachers who crafted the living, changing herd of my bones. In honor of the mindset that guides me today, I want to talk to you about one of my teachers. Let's get started. But first, if you're interested in how we find meaning through presence, practice, and language, listen to my recent podcast conversation with poet Jason Chambers. Jason's journey is about survival and return through addiction, loss, and rediscovery. What brought him back was the pull of the natural world and the act of writing it into meaning. We talk about cultivating reverence, the challenge of putting the indescribable into words, and how nature can become our greatest teacher. His insights on creative exploration, vulnerability, and connection feel like a natural extension of the themes that guide my work. You can find the link to that podcast episode by clicking on the show notes or going to the original post for this week's blog. The trouble with titles. It was prettier than the standard midlife crisis because it involved horses. The rite of passage that took me deep into the coves and hollers of the mountains coincided with my 40th birthday and a big chestnut horse that was as handsome as he was nuts. Explosive, domineering, and violent, Odin, like his namesake, refused to be tamed by any training knowledge that I possessed. In truth, he needed an exorcist. So did I. Fear had turned me into a wild animal of desire, impulsivity, and rage. My stomach was filled with ulcers, and my mind was plagued by an unquenchable thirst for connection. My womb was bleeding me dry, my body faltering, but I couldn't slow down because I had a farm to run and a point to prove. All my best ideas happen out of desperation. The old silver farm truck was unreliable, and I needed a vehicle that would allow me to make a weekly sojourn to a horse trainer whose knowledge could fill gaps in my understanding of how to take a horse with problems and make him reliable and usable for the general public. So I purchased a big black truck, brand new with a warranty, and admired the glow of its chrome in the moonlight as I sat on the front porch and drank wine while clicking the remote start just to hear its engine roar into life. The trainer, we'll call him the cowboy, came by the name Honestly. Raised by the founding fathers of the natural horsemanship movement, his knowledge filled gaps I didn't yet know how to name. I was hesitant to latch on to any one system of working with horses. The tools I craved were ancient, rooted in a desire to understand how we ruin horses in the English riding world and then send them to cowboys to fix. The goal was to drive 2 hours from my farm once a week, immerse myself in the cowboy's way of training, and write about what I discovered. I wanted to ride for pleasure, away from the eyes of staff and clients. I needed to reclaim pieces of myself that I'd traded for making horses my livelihood. I loaded up the big black truck with saddles, snacks, and the hazy edges of my failing inspiration, and took off for the hills. Stable Roots is where I share stories about horses, resilience, and the life I've built from both. Subscribing helps keep these stories going. A paid subscription goes even further by directly supporting the farm, the horses, and the work we do here daily. However you choose to be a part of this community, I'm just grateful you're here. A drive to store my memories. My people are from these mountains. The altitude climbs through resorts and despair, visitors and residents, each with differing claims to ownership over the land. Late summer wraps the mountains in a thick blue canopy. Golden and red flowers line the roadsides as I drive away from what I know and deeper into what I wish would happen. The last time I made this drive, I was a child in my grandfather's Cadillac, listening to cassette tapes while he schooled me on land grants and how our people came here with the holy permission of the King of England. The family plot is a short hike from the parking lot of a park below the fish hatchery. My Aunt Stella's cremains are scattered in these mountains, around tombstones worn smooth by rainfall dripping from the oaks that surround the burial site. Stella became part of the land in a way that makes me consider how we all return to it, how we're all a part of it, transmuting into the elements. I drive these roads with my grandfather now washed into the dirt, and the opposing angels of his legacy continuing their battle inside of me. It's time to choose the country or the city, the mountains or the pavement. Dual citizenship in both is no longer working. The cowboy greets me at the gate and waits for me to park the truck before he pulls me into the orbit of his tasks. There are bottle calves to feed and a horse to brand, and there is a commercial hauler coming with a semi-truck that can't make the curves in the higher elevations to drop 3 horses off. Money migrates up the coast every year like birds in reverse, humans escaping the heat for gated homes and the cool wildness of the mountains. Their horses come with them. The cowboy is made of tobacco and movement, his short frame adorned with a hat that states his bearing in a community that no longer cares about tractors and herding dogs. I'm Southern, born and raised, and I can barely make out his meaning through the thickness of his accent. He's equal parts parody and pride. He's agreed to take me on for the price of weekly lessons and the potential sale of horses, including Odin. "You look like that lady and the man from Snowy River," he said, the first day he came to my place to drop off a pony. It sounded like validation at the time. I might be a riding instructor, but I'm still human, and I've accepted worse praise for lesser reasons. The city boys hauling the expensive horses in the semi-trailer arrive, and I watch from the shadows of the barn as they alternately talk down to the cowboy and find themselves unable to unload the horses and have to beg for help. The horses are stressed, stoic statues on the trailer. The cowboy lets the hauler struggle a bit before he strolls up the big ramp and flicks a lead rope. The first horse follows him down the incline like butter. Soon he's transferred 3 horses from the big rig to his smaller stock trailer that will handle the sharp curves up the mountain. As I climb into the passenger seat of the cowboy's truck, the movement of the horses behind us sways the shocks. The sun begins to set, spreading purple shadows across the worn brown of his farmyard. Rich or poor, farms smell the same in the dark, and the horses couldn't care less about lineage. My genealogy is hard to rectify. My love for the land is at odds with what people do to grab it. The grandfather who raised me was split between his love for the forests and his fascination with cutting them down. The grandfather I never met took part in violence to prove that there were humans more lowly than sharecroppers. The cowboy guns his truck full force up the mountain as the darkening hills rush past us in a blur. He points out an unfinished tunnel where the agriculture school ripens cheese. I point out the turnoff to my family's graveyard. We talk about how we're probably distant cousins. I ask him what brought him to horses. He tells me about his alcoholic father raising him alone in a town on top of the mountain, how the population shrank in the winter, feast to famine. He tells me how two brothers found him as a kid at a livestock auction and saw that he knew how to sit on a horse, how he gave the appearance that the horse was child safe for the few moments it took to earn top dollar in a sale. He tells me how the brothers took him home with them and how they hauled him with the horses across the country, his world suddenly expanding like the way light hits a clear stone, how it's refracted and glorified into something else. He tells me how Ray Hunt and Tom Dorrance later found him and how they took him on, teaching him their ways, making him their rider as they spread the old vaquero practices, working cows like the Spanish settlers, in a world with its trains and cars and airplanes that had forgotten horsemanship was what created a rideable horse. He tells me how these men saw something big in him and how they brought it out, these dusty saviors with gnarled hands that could tie tight knots. I feel like I need to prove my privilege of sitting in his passenger seat as his truck roars up the mountain, not slowing through hairpin turns, the horses swaying in the trailer behind us. The moon has risen bright and round. I tell him how I understand that the tools of natural horsemanship got caught in the Pacific Northwest, while Texas was busy going large with its big, flat lands. I tell him how we fed the modern world with faster methods of moving cows, while the slow way dropped off to sate the insatiable hunger, this country of strangers racing to fill the boundaries of opposing oceans. I tell him how I've worked with horses every day of my adult life, but I don't know much about them. What I don't say is how equally less I know about myself. I'm in a speeding truck flying up a mountain. I came here on a whim, on a hunch. I need the cowboy to show me the missing links. I know the theory, I know the history, I say. I see how we got from there to here. But I need to know what the horses want, to understand why they do what they do, why I do what I do, and how to make my language cleaner when I talk to them. Then you'll need to start over at the beginning, he says. The truck banks hard down a twisting dirt road that follows a stream deep into a cove. The destination is a farm tucked into the trees. The warm glow of the lights around the barn flicker like candles in the cool summer shadows. The horses unload without a fuss, and, like it never happened, we're back on the road, moving slower as the truck brakes and winds down the steep grade on the return trip down the mountain. We're quiet as we go, my skin still vibrating from the fast pull of the engine when the trailer was loaded with heavy flight animals. The cowboy and I stare ahead at the forest cave of trees framed in the headlights, illuminating just enough to inch steadily forward. I'm turning to him with a question when he slows the truck to a halt in the middle of the empty road. He motions for me to be quiet and to look. In front of us, a black bear and two small cubs amble from one side of the road to the other. Unbothered by the light, our presence, the moving thread of progress and civilizations. They follow the same ancient path their ancestors have carried them, since these old mountains were just a dream that read like a vision. We are simultaneously held by and are complete strangers to this land in this place where 3 states converge and my people set up shop with a land grant. We brought the horses with us to this place. We fed them with foreign grass and wondered why the richness made them sick. They traveled here with us, but we still don't know them. These horses that we've kicked into a semblance of wildness that feels safe for us to digest. Stepping into my knowledge of them, growing it, expanding it, is almost like moving into fear itself, the unknown, the things I might uncover. I am the black bear in the headlight, or maybe she is me. Either way, I will follow the soft pause of my questions, slowly toward higher ground. These writings may be in 2 parts or 12. I'll be back next week with more horses and less backstory, maybe. But it feels right to write about this journey because so much of it has shaped who I am now. If my story calls to you, or if you've been walking similar roads, consider subscribing to Stable Roots. Free or paid, it's how I keep sharing these stories about horses, land, and the questions that don't have easy answers. Paid subscriptions also help support the horses and the farm that give back to our community. I also host a podcast called Relatively Stable, where I talk with people about the roads they've taken, the ones they've left behind, and the lessons they've learned along the way. If you're curious, you can listen to past conversations, like my recent deep dive with poet Jason Chambers, U.S. equestrian team great Kim Walness, creative visionary Jane Pike, and my wise sister Tamar Reno. Upcoming, I'll be sharing a conversation with equine body worker Sue Laminzo. And you can find Relatively Stable on all your favorite podcast platforms, or you can keep up with it from my blog, Stable Roots, which will click over to Relatively Stable. Thank you for being here with me. Love, Kim.